welcome to Sarah's Stampin' Retreat. Today we're going to be using some fun embossing techniques, and they're going to be inky techniques, but I'm just going to use some black ink that I'm sure most people have in their stash to create some fun looks on our cards. I'm going to be using the Spellbinders embossing folders of the month from their clubs. So we've got this one, which is the normal embossing folder of the month, and this beautiful floral one, which is the 3D embossing folder of the month. So for my first card, I'm going to use the normal embossing folder of the month, and I'm going to ink up this piece which has the Spellbinders on it. And my key tip for this is to use a brayer. I think for me this works much better than using the pad directly on, because it helps it to not go down into the cracks. However, it does also make the colour lighter, so if you want a really dense colour, then you might want to try going directly to the embossing folder. So I'm going to use the whole embossing folder, even though I'm just going to use a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch card, just so that I can make sure that I've got enough of this that works, because sometimes you get a bit that misses or something. So then I'm just going to pop it through with this kind of aqua coloured cardstock. So that's just embossed like you usually would. And look how pretty that looks where it's transferred all the ink. So then I'm going to use this stamp of the month for the focal point for this card. And I'll also use the coordinating dies. So if you get the stamp and die of the month, then you get this stamp set and the dies that cut it out. So you've also got this rectangle that cuts out all these sub-sentiments as well. And if you've been following along, you'll have seen me use this a lot this month. So then I'm going to stamp this onto watercolour cardstock with archival ink, because I want to use my Karin Brushmarker Pros, which are water-based. And I'm using my stamp wheel so that I can make sure that I can stamp that a few times, because the watercolour cardstock is a bit textured, and also my stamp pad's not so juicy anymore. So then I'm colouring this with my Karin markers. So then can you see how easy this is, where I've put just some pink in the centre and some pink under these folds in the petals, and then I can just use the blender pen to pull out that colour, and that colour colours the rest of the petal. There's no colour on the blender pen except for what I've pulled out of here. So then I'm happy with this now, and I can use the coordinating die to die cut it. So then I've got a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch card blank. I've cut a piece of grey cardstock to 3 3/4 by 5 inches, and then I've cut this piece, which is our embossed piece, 1/8 of an inch smaller. So let's layer those together. So then I'm going to add some foam strips to the back of here. And I'll pop that onto the front of my card. And then you could obviously use one of the sentiments from here, but I've decided to use this thanks, and this is from the small die of the month, which I'll pop on screen now. And it's just such a useful set because it is just loads and loads of word dies, and they all have the shadow part too. So I've cut the shadow part in grey and the thanks in white, and then I can add that onto my card. So then there's that first card finished. And you can see that that really simple inky embossing technique really adds to the background on that. So then for my second card, I'm going to create a bit of a background with some Distress Oxide inks. So I've got Kitsch Flamingo and Festive Berries, and I'm just going to blend them onto here in patches. And you'll see that even though it looks like a bit of a mess at first, once we add on the inky embossing, then it's going to look a lot better. So then I'm going to use the same inky embossing technique on the front of this floral embossing folder, but I'm going to use my Stays On ink pad just to give it a bit of a darker look. And you see I'm layering that on to get a much deeper black look to it, and then I'll run that through my die cutting machine. So then you can see that that floral looks really pretty. So then I've actually used the same mats and layers as the last card, but I'm going to do a landscape card as opposed to portrait. So I've got 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch card blank with a 3 3/4 by 5 inch grey piece, and I've cut this layer down to 1/8 of an inch smaller than that. And then I'm going to use this A Little Hello Sentiment set, which is one of my favourites at the moment because it makes a really nice feature on a card. So you get the 3 layers to the hello, so I've cut those in white, grey, and then I've blended some of the same Distress Oxide inks as we used for this onto some white cardstock and cut the hello out of that. And then it's also got this set of sub-sentiments, so I'm going to heat emboss those in white onto grey cardstock. And I really like that they've done all of the sentiments as just one stamp. So then I'll use my Wow White embossing powder. So then you get the one die as well, so you can cut out all the sentiments together. So then we've got all our sentiments, and you can see I keep all my spares in here so that I can use them another time. And I think I'm going to use this Hello From Me To You. So then I can glue together all of the layers. So then I'm going to add some foam strips behind the sentiment pieces. And then I can add those to my card. So then there's that card done. And I love how that sentiment takes up just enough of the card to kind of be a focal point, but also doesn't take away from that background too much. So then for this next card, I'm going to do the same embossing technique, but I'm going to do it on white cardstock, and then we're going to colour it. So just getting another look from this same inky embossing technique. So I'm going to run that through my die cutting machine. And just so you can see how I'm going to clean this as well, so I'm just covering this in this Ranger Archival cleaner. And you'll see it comes off reasonably easily. Where you've got some thicker bits that need a bit more, you can just go round that. You can see that's nice and clean again now. So then I've cut that down to 4 by 5 1/4 inches. I will probably end up cutting that down slightly more to the dimensions that we used on the other ones, but I just want to be sure before I do that. So then I'm going to use my brush markers to colour this in. And I'm not really going to do any fancy colouring on this. I'm just kind of going to colour it in like a block, because actually the black ink that we've added kind of does the shading job for us. And also there's already a lot of depth from the embossing, so it makes the colouring really easy. So there's that panel finished. I'm really happy with how that turned out. Because the black ink didn't transfer down all the holes, some of it just kind of stuck around the image, I was originally going to colour that in grey, but actually I quite like the white with just kind of bits of the ink. I think it has kind of a more like distress feel to it, so I'm going to leave it like that. So I've cut this down again to the exact same measurements. So again, 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch card blank, 3 3/4 by 5 inch grey piece, and then this piece is 1/8 of an inch smaller. So I'm going to glue those together. And then I'm going to use this same thanks from that small day of the month that I used on the first card. There are so many words in that set, but I'm short on thank you cards at the moment, so I'm going to use the thanks again. By the way, I should have said, I think the reason that my ink didn't transfer properly is because I'm using a Stays On pad that's really old and I've not re-inked it. So the ink's a bit dry and I think it dried out too quickly. So just make sure you have a nice juicy ink pad if you want it to transfer a bit better than mine did. But I'm kind of seeing it as a happy accident, to be honest, because I really like the way that it turned out. So then I'm just going to add this on some foam strips. And then I just love the way that that turned out. Then let's bring in all 3 of today's cards. So I really hope that you enjoyed creating these cards with me and testing out some inky embossing techniques. I hope everyone will be able to try, because I think most people have got black ink in their stash. I'd love to know which is your favourite card. Please do let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed today's video, I'd really appreciate you clicking like below. You can also press subscribe if you'd like to see future videos. If you press the bell button and select all, then YouTube will also notify you when I've got a new video available. All of the products that I've used to create today's cards are listed in the description below, and there's also a link there to my blog where you can find a picture supply list if that helps you find what you're looking for. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope to see you again soon.